What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Rangers. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Eric Wilson. Today, we're going to do something a little bit special, something a little bit different. We're going to be going through some of your questions that you left for us on Instagram, Twitter, and our YouTube community page, doing a little bit of a fan mailbag here. If you want your questions to be featured in the next mailbag, make sure you go ahead and follow us on Twitter at Fireside Rangers, on Instagram at Fireside Rangers, and stay tuned to the community page on this channel for when we post for the next round of questions for the mailbag. Drop your questions below and we'll go ahead and go through them. But we do have some really great questions in today's episode, Eric. A whole lot of them from our viewers, especially on the community page. A lot of topics and storylines to dive into and discuss in this episode. So I want to waste no more time and go ahead and get into it. But before we do, make sure to like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode and comment your thoughts on the topics discussed in this episode down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. Go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels, as I said, at Fireside Rangers. Without further ado, Eric, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are one of these questions that really stands out to you that you want to go ahead and dive into?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm excited to be here for this episode. It is a little bit of a special one. We started this channel like close to 2 years ago because we love the Rangers, but now we really do it for the fans and interacting with you guys. So thank you for all the questions and comments you got. I think the first one I want to dive into, because all the returning viewers that have seen the live streams and all of my thoughts on this specific topic will know that I need to apologize. Cheyenne asked, what are your thoughts on Blake Wheeler finally scoring a point? Everyone knows I've been dogging on Wheeler this entire season. I've been saying he's trash. He's horrible. He's never going to score a point. But then he goes and he gets an assist. So, good for you, Wheeler.
Yeah, good for Blake Wheeler. Thank you, Cheyenne, for the question. What are my thoughts on Blake Wheeler finally scoring a point? Listen, it was a long time coming. I'm sure a lot of you saw on YouTube Shorts. We posted it in our previous episode. We had a great debate about Blake Wheeler between Will, one of our co-hosts here, Colin, one of our co-hosts here. They got into it. Eric was a part of it as well. You were pretty critical of Blake Wheeler. Will was the most critical of a player on this podcast that I think we've ever had against Blake Wheeler. Call him an old man. It wasn't pretty, but Colin was the voice of reason, in my opinion, who did bring up that Wheeler is playing in a new environment, in a new role that he's never played, and he's getting up there in age. It's just different, and I think he's been doing a fine job. And I do tend to agree more with Colin than I agree with you, Eric, and Will about Blake Wheeler being completely washed up. I don't think that's the case. He's finally got his first point. Let's see how he continues to play. It's a long season. Obviously, the trade deadline is way out in advance, but Blake Wheeler doesn't continue to perform or doesn't continue to improve his play. Sure, there can be discussions about whether he gets healthy scratched or if he becomes a trade candidate, whatever. But right now, I think that I'm erring on the side of caution here. I'm cautiously optimistic that Wheeler is still settling into the new environment and the new role in Laviolette's system. And I think that he still will turn it around and become a solid point producer for the Rangers. Not a big-time point producer. I'm not talking 50, 60 points, but I do think that he'll be able to make an impact on the sheet going forward. Let's dive into another question here. We have a good one right here from... Let's see which one. From Pavel Jackal, I think is his name on the YouTube community page. Pavel, thank you for leaving your comment. He said, trade Gaudreau and bring back Kane. So diving into something pretty spicy, pretty early on in this episode, Eric. Bringing back Patrick Kane is a conversation that comes up over and over and over again. And also the conversation of Barclay Goodrow seems to continue to come up because he hasn't been too great this season. Now, I mentioned this in, I think, our last episode, Eric. My big criticism of Barclay Goodrow, the stupid penalties he continues to commit. He keeps going into the lineup. He brings that grittiness. He brings that physicality and aggression on the fourth line, which you need on there. But he doesn't need to bring the stupidity along with him, right? The dumb tripping or dumb penalties that he gives up that puts the other team in on the power play and leaves the Rangers shorthanded. That's the problem with Barclay Goodrow, in my opinion, so far this season. If he fixes that, I think he's fine. He can continue to play on the fourth line, be that grinder that the Rangers need him to be. But those penalties have been pretty damning. This team hasn't done a whole lot at even strength anyway this season, and leaving them shorthanded, that doesn't help in any respect. But in terms of bringing back Patrick Kane, trading Barclay Goodrow is the key to bringing back Patrick Kane because Goodrow is getting paid a really high amount this season, and you have to get his contract off the books before you can even consider signing a player like Patrick Kane. But my thing with Patrick Kane is I think he would disrupt everything. I don't think that he would fit in with these lines too well. I mean, that's a player who you don't want down on the fourth line. I guess you could throw him on the third line. Is that really maximizing his skill set? I don't think that he's necessarily going to want to join the New York Rangers. I know that we're on his short list of teams, but I think there's other opportunities out there for him to get top 6 minutes elsewhere. And I think he's going to take those opportunities over an opportunity to play in the bottom six for the New York Rangers. And again, like I said, I just don't think that he completely fits in with this team and what they're building right now. I like these lines. Yes, we're a little bit banged up now. Filipino out of the lineup is going to severely affect the performance of this team, but I don't think that trading for Patrick Kane is necessarily the answer. Eric, I want to know whether or not you disagree with me and also what your thoughts are on Barclay Goodrow's performance so far this season.
Well, first, I got to give a quick shout out to my boy Pavel for the question. That's a name that I've definitely seen in all of our live streams. So shout out to the returning viewer right there. I'll break it down player by player. Barclay Goodrow, he's not good, right? He's done nothing this season. He has like negative 10 points. His penalty minutes are through the roof. And I personally think that the smartest play he's made this season was deciding to step away for a game to go see the birth of his child. I really think on the ice, Goodrow has contributed absolutely nothing of value. He just doesn't do anything. And he's taking up $3.6 million of our cap space. And do I want to get rid of him? Yes, 100%. Absolutely. The problem is going to be finding a team that's willing to take him on. Because back when he was with Tampa, he was great. And he lived up to the money that he was making. And then he comes to the Rangers. And now we just have this like pylon on the ice that's just making all this money. And when teams look for a possible trade involving him, they're not going to look at what he used to be. They're going to look at what he's done for the Rangers and how his like value matches that salary tag right there. So if the Rangers are going to trade him, I don't know if we're going to get rid of all 3.6. The Rangers are probably going to have to retain something. The return package probably won't be anything good. But if you're going to go out and go for someone like Kane with that extra money, then maybe the return package doesn't need to be good. So I guess the transition on the Patrick Kane, it's really tough because the kid inside of me who like grew up watching prime Patrick Kane really wants to say like that he was injured last year. It'll be different this time. But from a realistic standpoint, the risk is just so high. Because if you go and you sign Patrick Kane to like, even if it's like a 1 year, $3.6 million deal, you're still stuck with him if he sucks. And you're right. Like you don't want to put a player like him down on the third line because that line of Trocheck and Cooley when we're at full health, they're not really the point scorers. They're like the physical grinding third line that's playing defense, drawing penalties, and just all of the aspects of hockey that Patrick Kane isn't built for. He's a point producer. He's a playmaker, a goal scorer, and he needs to be in the top six to really be at his full potential. Now, then you can make the argument that Lafreniere on that second line hasn't really lived up to his potential. Kakko only has 2 points so far. Could Kane replace one of them? Theoretically, yes, but we're still so early on in the season, 11 games in. We haven't really given the kids a chance to prove themselves up there. And I don't think we've given them enough time to really show why they deserve to be in the top six. And I don't want to just sit here and be like, pull out one of them, throw in Patrick Kane, and let's hope for the best, because then you're kind of resetting that same problem under Gallant where the kids are trapped in the third line. So it's a tough one. I see the arguments on both sides of the Kane spectrum of why, like, yes, we should definitely go out and try to sign this guy. But then I also completely understand the cautionary side of it, where it's like, we tried it once, it didn't work. Let's just move on, So I'm personally torn. I don't know if I have a specific answer of yes or no. I agree, but I don't think I would be mad at either option the Rangers decide on Kane.
Yeah, personally, I'm against the potential addition of Patrick Kane. I think it's a question that, again, it's going to keep coming up. I'm sure that the Rangers are going to keep staying connected to Kane. We're going to hear new rumors each week about Patrick Kane, his interest in the Rangers interest in him. So we'll dive into that topic, I'm sure, many more times going forward. But right now, where things stand, I don't think that he's a fit with this team. I'm not in on Kane, but I agree with you. I do see the other side of the argument where, you might as well put the best team that you can on paper and hope for the best. It's what the Rangers tried to do last season. It didn't work, but I think a lot of that had to do with Gallant. So maybe Peter Laviolette would be able to put a system together to make all the superstars work. But here is another question here that I think we should go ahead and dive into. This one's from Edwin Rivera 5695 on the YouTube community page. Thank you for your question, Edwin. Fan mailbag question for Fireside Rangers: what needs to be done to get Kakko scoring again? And I will add in here, Frank T285, thank you for leaving a comment as well. He responded to Edwin saying he needs to stop being so fancy, gain the zone, set up, and blast the puck, or simply get the dirty goals off rebounds in front of the net. He may have to pay a price, though. That would result in the other team taking a penalty. It's a win-win nonetheless. That's what Frank said in response to Edwin. And also, Chris Pritchard, 898 on the YouTube community page. Thank you, Chris, for also commenting. Said, in regards to Kakko to get going, I say change it up from cycling on the boards to stand in front of the net like Kreider does. So we got a couple of viewers here throwing out some ideas to Edwin about how Kaapo Kakko can get scoring again. I think that's pretty good insight as well, but we should go ahead and dive into it and give our perspective on it. Now, has Kakko been what we wanted him to be this season? No, it's been a little bit of a disappointing start to the year, and we're going to discuss how disappointing it's been for him and maybe Hedo Lafreniere as well. And another question that we have coming up here, Eric, but I do want to know your take on it. How does Kaapo Kakko get back onto the point sheet? How does he get scoring goals again? What's the solution here? And what are your thoughts of the idea that Chris Pritchard threw out there of kind of having him play that Chris Kreider 2.0 role, stand in front of the net, try and get those deflections? I know that Chris Kreider is like the deflection goat, like you can't really just replicate what he does, by being in front of the net. But I do think there is something to be said about that. I think that could be an interesting strategy for Kakko to kind of try out here, maybe stand in front on that, get some deflection goals. I think that there are different ways that the Rangers can get him back to scoring, but what is your take on it?
I'll start off by responding to Frank T, because I partially agree with what he said. I don't think Kakko has been too fancy, or I think he's very smart with the puck. He's one of the smartest puck handlers on the Rangers. He enters the zone very successfully, and it takes a lot of effort for defenders to get the puck away from him. And then he kind of passes it off to Kreider and Zibanejad. But I do agree with Frank saying he's got to shoot more. I don't know exactly how many shots he's taken so far this season, but I know it's definitely not a lot. And if he were to shoot the puck more, it would go in a lot more. And I think a large portion of his failure to score, even assists at this point, is Kreider and Zibanejad, where every time he enters the zone, he does pass it off to them. And yes, are Zibanejad and Kreider some of our top point scorers this season? Yeah, but most of those points have come on the power play. So I think it's kind of just that first line as a whole that at 5v5 isn't really producing much. That's the reason why Kakko is kind of a little bit behind, because he's on the second power play unit, a unit which is kind of not really good. I look at the two Rangers power play lines, just night and day. Power play 1 is heaven, and then power play 2, I'm about to turn off the game type thing. And then just on the comment about he needs to stand in front of the net more and be more like Kreider, I think that's a great idea, and I think that would benefit Kakko immensely. But the issue is he plays on a line with Kreider, so you can't have two guys standing in front of the net at the same time and kind of just leaving Zibanejad out high and dry. And if it comes down to having to choose one of the two doing it, I'm gonna have to pick Kreider. Like you said, Anthony, he's the GOAT of deflections and putting the puck in the net in front of the net. So if Kakko were on a different line, I would fully support that. So I think in order for him to get on the score sheet more, when he enters the zone like he always does, rather than passing it off to Zibanejad, who will then hopefully shoot it for a Kreider deflection, let Kakko take that shot, or don't even let him, because I'm sure Laviolette is encouraging him to, as all of the fans are. But Kakko, he has a lot of confidence when he has the puck. It kind of just seems like he doesn't have the confidence when shooting it. And I think once he gets that back and he starts ripping the puck on net more, he'll definitely start to score more goals. And even if he doesn't put the puck in the net himself, Kreider will be there, the deflection goat, to help Kakko get the assist. I mean, you look at Panarin. Panarin had the same issue where he was racking up assists, but he had no goals because he wasn't shooting it. Now, all of a sudden this season, Panarin's shooting the puck every chance he can get. He's leading our team in points. He's scoring goals. He's getting assists, and he's looking like a Hart Trophy candidate. So I'm not trying to compare Kakko to Panarin, because obviously Panarin's on this next level. But if Kakko were to implement a similar style of play where he's just shooting the puck more, that's what it's going to take.
Yeah, pretty good solutions that you throw out there. I think it'll be curious to see how Capo Caco kind of turns things around. I don't think he's having like a terrible season by any means, but yes, putting more points on the board are going to be it's going to be a point of emphasis for him to turn things around. And really, some fans feel like all of the kids need to turn things around. I want to dive into this big question here. I think this was on the Instagram page coming from BF1 at
This is
BF1_Brian.
on
Maybe it was
Twitter.
on. This was a Twitter question. BF1, thanks for leaving your comment on the Twitter and asking this question. It's a spicy one. So he asks, at what point does Drury trade Kako, Hedel, and or Lafreniere? Doesn't seem any of them will reach their draft position potential. How did the New York Rangers get these so wrong? I look at Hughes, et al., and we have duds. Thanks. So thanks for leaving your question, BF1. This again, like I said, a lot of stuff to unpack here. When does Drury trade away the likes of pretty much all of the kids you mentioned? And he doesn't feel like these kids are ever going to reach their draft position potential. Now, Eric, you and I have discussed that quite a bit on air, off air. Players like Lafreniere not reaching their potential, wishing that you could go back in time, get a different player, wishing that the Rangers had a different draft pick and selected different players in those drafts, right? It's revisionist history. At the time, looked like the Rangers made the right decisions, but so far, these players really haven't reached their potential. Now, there's a lot of different factors as to why. And I think the main one that we've discussed in the past, Eric, is that they were trapped down in the bottom six. We think that Gerard Gallant wasn't really developing them properly, wasn't giving them enough time on ice, giving them the opportunities to make plays, putting them in the position to succeed. Now they're in that position, and maybe they're still not succeeding to the level that Rangers fans hope them to. So how do they turn it around? And at one point, Eric, do you throw all three of those players on the trade block and say, okay, I'm finally ready to listen to offers and potentially move on from any one of these kids going forward?
There's a lot to break down here, right? Because you're right, and BF1 is right. It doesn't seem like any of them will reach their draft position potential. Lafreniere drafted first overall, hasn't looked like a first overall pick. Kako second, doesn't look like a second overall pick. But the thing is, they're not bad players by any means. You look at last season, Capo Kako still put up a 40-point season. That's not bad by any means. Now, sure, would we have liked him to be putting up 70 to 80 by this stage in his career? Yeah, but it's not like he's come out here putting up like less than 10 points a season. So at what point did they trade them? I don't think they should. Is there a lot of things that they could be better at? Have they kind of disappointed us based on just the number that they were drafted? Yeah, but they're not bad players. It's not like Barclay Goodrow where Kako and Lafreniere don't look good at all. They have a lot of highs to their game, and sure, there are some lows, but I don't know if they should be traded. And like, how did the Rangers get these so wrong? I don't have anything bad to say about Hedel. Yeah, he was a first round pick, but he was drafted like 17th. He's like 45 points last season. He's injured right now, but he was on pace for even more. I got nothing bad to say about Hedel. I think we did good there. But like at the time, Lafreniere and Kako, they were the obvious choices. Going into both of those drafts, which to be fair, based on the like scouting reports and everything, both were kind of projected to be like weaker drafts. Like Lafreniere was like the obvious number one, but then after that, everything was kind of like it could have gone any way. There was no like clear top three like there usually is. And sure, have other players like broken into the NHL and already putting up insane amount of points? Yeah, but at the time, if the Rangers didn't pick Lafreniere, we would have been like the laughing stock of the league. And the same thing with Kako. His draft class was a little bit weaker as well. It was him and Hughes, and it was very clear that the Devils were going to pick Hughes first overall. There was maybe a 10% chance that they went with Kako, and then we landed Hughes. But Kako was the very obvious choice. So I don't think the Rangers did anything wrong with their drafting. I think it's just the way that they entered the league, under two coaches who didn't want to give them the light of day, give them the playing time they needed. And we have seen some improvements from them. You look at Kako, you look at Lafreniere, every season they improve in their point totals. It's just like a really slow improvement. Like Lafreniere is improved by 4 points or something like that, every season. There's never been that huge jump like we've seen with Hedel, and we'll hopefully see with Kako. I think we kind of saw it last year. It's not really looking like it this season, but I think they're going to keep improving. They are still very, very young. We don't call them the kids anymore, but none of them are even 25 yet. So I think it's still too early in their careers. I know it's like we keep saying it year after year. It's still too early. It's still too early. But it is. They're improving. They don't look like top 2 draft picks, but they're not bad by any means. So don't trade them. Hold on to them. Maybe they're not going to become the players you want them to, but they'll still be good.
Yeah, I'm not losing hope either. I think, especially with what you said about Philip Hedl. He's injured now, but I thought that he was on pace for a really good season. He was playing some good hockey. And Lafreniere, I know, there's been a lot of criticism thrown towards Alexis Lafreniere. I haven't been super disappointed in the way that Lafreniere's played this season. Of course, first goal of the year for the New York Rangers. And again, I just don't think that he's been that terrible. Now, when we get to the deadline, if a good offer comes knocking, I think that the Rangers consider it. I made that argument last season because I was disappointed in the way that Lafreniere was performing. I mentioned that the Rangers should at least consider it. I got a lot of hate from viewers of the channel because of that. But it seems like more and more people are warming up to the idea of maybe seeing what the Rangers can get for Lafreniere. But it's still Kakko, Hedl. I don't think that they should be on the trade block just yet. But again, it is a long season. Let's see how things go. And that kind of ties into another question here that we have on the community page. This one from Sam Bakara. He said, I'm pretty confident we'll get to the playoffs with this roster, barring injuries. My question is, what plans, pieces should we be making now or at trade to be dominant in the playoffs? Does the current Lavi play style stack up in the cup run? So I think that's a really good question because not only does it point out that the Rangers are playing well, they're going to make the playoffs. Injuries would be the only thing that derails their season. I agree with you there, Sam. But the main question is, what pieces could the Rangers acquire at the trade deadline or maybe now to really make them that dominant postseason team? And can Laviolette put it all together, right? Because they made all those moves last year. Gerard Gallant wasn't able to put those new puzzle pieces together, wasn't able to make it work in the playoffs. Can Laviolette do that? Do you trust him to do that, Eric? And what moves do you think that they could potentially make? And I'll throw out one name that I know somebody asked a question about, and I'll give them a shout out when we get to the next question because they had more to it. But I'll throw out one name, Frank Vatrano. Do you think that's a guy that the Rangers could potentially bring my paisano back here? And what other moves do you think maybe the Rangers can make? And how do you think Laviolette would balance it?
I think we're going to see a very different trade line this year than we did last year, where you look at last season and we were just shooting for the stars. We went out, we got Tarasenko, we got Patrick Kane, like all the big stars that were on the market, and it didn't work. And I think the problem with that is that the Rangers top 6, all of our stars had a good thing going, and Drury kind of just tried to add too much icing on the cake, and the whole cake came crumbling down. And it didn't work at all. So you look at this season and what we have our stars and they're cooking right now. Panarin's cooking, Kreider's, Abanajad, Shesterkin, Fox before the injury. Everyone's playing really good, and I don't think you want to touch that like we did last year. I'm sure the Rangers will make a move or two at the deadline, but it's not going to be anything flashy, and it shouldn't be. It'll probably be like moving Goudreau out for just another like third liner grinder that could play better defense, kill penalties, and draw penalties at the same time. We don't need any more goal scorers. We don't need any more playmakers. We just need someone like that, kind of like Tyler Mott, or like Sammy Blais, or like what Sammy Blais was supposed to be with the Rangers. These bottom 6 depth pieces, I think is what we need. I also could see us going out for maybe another defender. Gustafsson has been pretty solid so far. He scores a lot of points, but he doesn't really play that well defensively. And I think at this point of the season, that's okay. But maybe in a playoff atmosphere, maybe we could look for someone who has a little more defensive minded and more veteran leadership to go along with Schneider. But like Frank Vatrano, you brought up his name. I personally, with the team we have, wouldn't, because Vatrano is more of like that, yeah, he's like a grinder, but he focuses a little bit more on the offense. He's a little small. So when you look at it, like any open position for him on like the third line, he's not going to really fit in well with Cooley and Trocheck, in my opinion. I could very well be wrong. I know he's having a phenomenal season over in Anaheim, I think it is right now. So I'm honestly not sure. I don't even know who's going to be on the market at that point in time. But I think the overall message that I'm trying to convey is avoid the stars, get like some of the underrated third or fourth line, bottom 6, like killing penalties, blocking shots, stuff like that, and just get Goudreau out of there.
Just get Goudreau out of there seems to be a theme here for you and a lot of our viewers and commenters. One last question that I want to bring up here. This is from White GD. He says trade Goudreau again, and Kako and Lafreniere, and bring back Tarasenko in a trade. Sign him to a 2-year extension bump. In the meantime, Wheeler up, and then make a trade for Vetrano again. Never should have let either of them walk. So I know that you just said maybe you're not crazy about the idea of bringing back Frank Vetrano. You know that I am. I would love to see that happen. I don't think that the Rangers ever should have let him go. I agree with White GD here. But he also says bring back Tarasenko. That would be interesting. That is also a player when we got to the offseason, Eric. If you remember, I said I would much rather bring back Tarasenko than Kane. I think that the Rangers should do everything in their power to bring back Tarasenko. And of course, when Tarasenko signed elsewhere, we came to the realization he could have been had for a much cheaper price than initially anticipated. That's a player that the Rangers could have retained if they really wanted to, and in my opinion, should have retained. So I do agree with this comment. If there is a way to shake this one out here, you trade Goudreau, that frees you up some cap space. Of course, that forces you to put Blake Wheeler in a larger role in the meantime, as he points out. But it also does open the avenue to potentially bring back Tarasenko and Vetrano. However, you probably have to give up one of, if not both, Kako and Lafreniere in order to make this deal go down. What are your thoughts on this? This is kind of playing a lot of Chris Drury thinking cap, playing GM here and getting really creative with this roster construction. But I do think there's something to be said about trading Goudreau, maybe looking to bring back Vetrano and also Tarasenko, and really just the fact that the Rangers probably shouldn't have let those guys walk in the first place, in my opinion. I share with him.
Yeah, so I just had to pull it up really quick because I know that Tarasenko, he signed with Ottawa, and just now after looking at it, it was a 1-year deal for $5 million, right? So I remember when that news first broke that Ottawa signed him, we all kind of just sat there and we're just sort of like blinking our eyes really quick. We were like, oh, like why didn't we do that? Because instead we decided to go out there and just make like $1 million, like $800,000 like 1-year deals with a bunch of like old people. But I'm kind of looking back on it. Tarasenko, he's had a good season so far with Ottawa. 3 goals, 7 points, 7 assists for 10 points in 10 games. So he's a point per game player on a like less than perfect Ottawa team. But I still avoid it because he's on a 1-year deal. After this, he'll be another rental because after this season, if the Rangers want to sign him to maybe 2 years, that number is going to go up, and we don't have that money. We have a lot of players coming up that are going to need to be re-signed, and it's not going to work out. It's going to be another rental. We don't have anywhere to fit him in the lineup, and I don't want to give up anything that we have that's already working for just another risk. So yeah, like if you would have asked me this question right when we got eliminated from the playoffs, I would have been like, hell yeah, let's bring back Tarasenko rather than Kane and all these other people. But at this point in time, I got to say, avoid Tarasenko and any big name like that. Just to go back to my other trade deadline comment, avoid the stars, stick with what you got working for the offense, and really just build upon that depth.
Yeah, I will say, while I like the idea of bringing back Vetrano, and I think that it's interesting that so many fans are kind of like throwing out the idea of trading Goudreau and making some big time roster construction moves here. I love what the Rangers got, and I love what Peter Laviolette's doing. And I think that maintaining this core, getting healthy, building all the way around it, I think that's the key here for the New York Rangers. I think that's how they find the most success this regular season and going into the postseason. I think that just trusting in Laviolette, trusting in the way that he's constructed this roster is the way to do it. I don't think that this is one of those seasons where Chris Drury needs to go ahead and rework this team and try and add a bunch of star power. Listen, last year, the Rangers, they kind of were backed into a corner, felt like it was now or never. Like we have to go ahead and make this cup run in this season or we might miss our window of opportunity. I think that they were wrong. I think that they recognize that they were wrong as well. They still have a lot of talented players. They have some prospects coming up that are really good, and they have some young players making an impact on these lines. I think that the Rangers just need to stay the course, not get too creative at the trade deadline, and kind of just stick with what they've got here because what we've seen from Peter Laviolette, I mean, I know that the temperature has kind of changed now that the Rangers lost that game to the Wild in overtime, but what they did on that road trip was incredible. Were they the prettiest wins? No, some of them were really ugly. but Laviolette was finding ways to coach his team into a position to grind things out and escape with narrow victories. And I think that there's so much to be said about that. So I'm still confident in the lines that the Rangers have, this roster that they have, and I'm confident in Peter Laviolette. And I don't really see the need right now to make a ton of changes. Ask me again when we get closer to the trade deadline, or we get further into the season. Maybe things change. But right now, I'm super impressed with the start to the New York Rangers season, and I am good to continue watching this team constructed the way that it is, coached by Peter Laviolette, move forward and hopefully go ahead and win that Stanley Cup. But that pretty much does wrap this one up. We kind of got through every question here. Thank you all for leaving your questions for this fan mailbag. Reminder, if you want to be featured on the next fan mailbag, just stay tuned to our social media channels, Twitter at Fireside Rangers, Instagram at Fireside Rangers, and the YouTube community page. We will post the day before we do a fan mailbag. You drop your questions down below, and we will bring them up and answer them in the mailbag episode. So stay tuned to all those social media channels. And again, make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and comment your thoughts on the topics down below in the comment section. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And go ahead and follow us on all of our social media channels at Fireside Rangers. Without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go
Let's go
Rangers.
Rangers.